My name is Ryan. I'm 41 years old, living in Phoenix, Arizona, a place where the air itself feels like a test of endurance. 3 years ago, I married Laura. She was warm, careful with her words, and tired in that way people get after too many disappointments. Together, we tried to make a new start, the kind of second chance people write speeches about. We built a blended family, or at least tried to. I brought 2 children from my first marriage, Liam, 9, and Hannah, 7. Gentle kids, quiet and observant. Laura had 2 of her own, Cole, 15, and Ava, 13. Their father, Steve, lived 15 miles away, close enough for his name to still echo through the house, far enough that he could choose when to care. When I moved in, I told myself I understood what I was walking into. Love had rules, and I thought I knew them. Patience, presence, respect. Be steady, be kind, never raise your voice. That was my creed. I told myself that if I kept showing up, day after day, chore after chore, paycheck after paycheck, I could earn my place in this house. I wanted to be the stepfather I never had. The quiet kind of man who doesn't demand affection, who earns it through the long, invisible labor of showing up. So I worked at it. Every day. I made dinner when Laura stayed late at work. I drove Cole to football practice, even when he barely spoke to me during the ride. I helped Ava with her science projects, even though she never once said thank you. I included them in everything: birthdays, trips, plans for the house. I tried to erase the dividing lines between hers and mine. Everything was shared: money, effort, time. When the air conditioner broke that first summer, I paid the repair bill without hesitation. When Ava wanted a new phone, I bought one, telling myself it was an investment in trust. When Cole needed new cleats, I drove across town to find the exact pair he wanted. I covered the school supplies, the phone plans, the insurance, even the groceries that filled the fridge they all took for granted. I kept a spreadsheet on my computer to track expenses. Nothing obsessive, just order. Looking back now, it feels like a confession. Each line item a small prayer for acceptance. Still, I told myself it was working. There were moments, small ones, when the house almost felt like a home. The kids laughing in the pool. Laura resting her head on my shoulder during movie nights. Those were the scenes that tricked me into believing we were becoming something solid. But beneath the calm, small fractures were forming. Cole was polite in front of Laura but distant when it was just us. Ava barely made eye contact. My own children, Liam and Hannah, seemed to sense the tension, the imbalance of affection that ran through the house like a draft no one could block. Sometimes I'd catch Hannah watching me when the others ignored me. She didn't understand why kindness was something her step-siblings met with silence. Liam, ever the quiet observer, asked me one night, "Do they like us, Dad?" I said yes, even though I didn't believe it. I wanted so badly for this house to work. I wanted to prove that a man could rebuild a life without bitterness. So I gave. Constantly. I poured time, money, patience into a house that felt like a test of endurance. Every day, I woke early to pack lunches, check schedules, pay bills. Every night, I stayed up after everyone was asleep, making sure nothing had been forgotten. And still, I remained invisible. The signs were small but relentless. I'd make dinner, and Cole would wait until Laura came home before eating. If I asked him to take out the trash, he'd shrug and say, "I'll wait for Mom." Ava never asked me for anything directly, always through her mother. I was a ghost with a wallet, a man-shaped shadow standing between their comfort and their resentment. First, I excused it all. I told myself it was natural, teenagers testing boundaries, children adjusting to new authority. I convinced myself that indifference wasn't rejection, just hesitation. But hesitation, when fed long enough, turns into contempt. Still, I kept trying. I planned a trip to the Grand Canyon that summer, something to remind us that families are built by shared memories. I booked the cabins, paid the deposits, packed snacks, arranged the drive. The kids barely looked up from their phones during the ride. Laura smiled politely, her hands folded in her lap, the silence between us thick and polite. At the overlook, the sunset painted the canyon in fire. I remember standing there, arm around Laura, watching the light fade while Cole and Ava took selfies with faces that held no trace of joy. My children stood quietly beside me, unsure if they were allowed to feel happy in front of them. I told myself that this was what rebuilding looked like. Slow, uneven, fragile. Back home, the photos from the trip were full of smiles that didn't reach the eyes. I printed them anyway, framed them, hung them on the hallway wall like evidence of something I was still trying to believe in. That's the strange thing about hope. It can survive on almost nothing. Laura saw the cracks too. I know she did, but whenever I tried to talk about it, she brushed it off gently. They just need time, she'd say. They're good kids. Good kids. Maybe. But good intentions don't erase bad habits. And silence, I learned, is its own form of betrayal. There were nights I'd lie awake beside her, staring at the ceiling fan turning above us, replaying the day in my head. The way Cole ignored me. The way Ava smiled only when Steve's name came up. I wondered if Laura noticed, or if pretending not to see had become easier for her. Sometimes, I'd hear her phone buzz late at night, and she'd glance at it quickly before setting it face down on the nightstand. I never asked who it was. I didn't need to. Some questions exist only to confirm what you already know. But even then, I stayed. Because love, to me, meant endurance. And endurance meant swallowing disappointment until it stopped tasting bitter. I tried to convince myself that every family needs a quiet figure. The man who absorbs tension so others can breathe. The one who holds the roof steady even when no one sees the weight he carries. That was my role. The invisible stepfather. I became fluent in the language of silence. I learned how to smile when ignored, how to nod when dismissed, how to keep paying for things that made me feel like an outsider. There's a peculiar kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who depend on you but don't see you. You become both necessary and disposable. The house needs you to function, but it doesn't need you to exist. By the end of that first year, I could feel it, the slow erosion of something I couldn't name. Respect, love, maybe just hope. Still, I kept pretending. I told myself that small gestures mattered. The way Ava sometimes said thanks under her breath. The way Cole nodded when I handed him gas money. The way Laura leaned her head on my shoulder after long days. But deep down, I knew. Something was breaking quietly, and no one wanted to hear the sound. A family without balance doesn't collapse all at once. It leans. It shifts. The foundation moves grain by grain until one morning you wake up, and everything looks the same, but nothing feels steady anymore. That's where this story begins. In the quiet before the fall. In the illusion of peace that comes right before the first real crack forms. Because no matter how hard you try, love can't grow in a house where gratitude has died. The second year began with small storms. The kind that don't break windows, just wear down the walls a little each day. Cole was 15 then, tall, restless, full of that quiet contempt teenage boys wear like armor. Ava was 13, already fluent in her mother's sighs, her father's charm, and my invisibility. They moved through the house like guests who never unpacked, touching nothing that wasn't theirs, obeying no rule that didn't come from their mother's voice. It started with simple things. Cole refused to take out the trash. He'd look at me, smirk, and say, "Mom didn't ask me to." Ava left her plates on the counter and her shoes in the hallway. When I asked her to clean up, she said sweetly, "Mom says she'll help me later." It wasn't rebellion, it was dismissal. A quiet decision that my words carried no weight. Laura told me not to take it personally. "They're still adjusting," she said. But her tone was weary, defensive. She'd stopped looking me in the eyes when she said it. The house divided itself without a word. Cole and Ava's laughter came from one side, my own children's quiet obedience from the other. The dinners that once tried to be family gatherings turned into performances of civility. Two tribes at the same table. Laura and I sat between them, pretending that silence was peace. Then came the comparisons. The subtle ones first. Cole talked about his father's new apartment, his father's freedom. Ava mentioned how Dad let them stay up late or skip chores. Every story ended with the same unspoken verdict. Steve is fun. You are not. I became the background noise of their comfort, the one who paid for everything while being measured against a man who paid for nothing. It's strange how quickly a house can forget who holds it together. One night, Cole asked if he could go to a concert. I said no, it was on a school night. He rolled his eyes and muttered, "If Dad were here, he'd let me." Laura, sitting at the table, didn't correct him. She just looked tired. That was worse than disagreement. At least anger means someone still cares. Ava, emboldened, started testing me too. She'd ignore chores, talk over me, call her father the real one. I kept my patience, though every word of it felt borrowed from somewhere I no longer owned. The fracture widened when my own children began to notice. Liam asked one evening why Cole never had to help with dinner. "Because he's older," Laura said before I could answer. It was a small lie, but it split the air in two. Hannah cried one afternoon after Cole mocked her drawings. She came to me, holding the crumpled paper, whispering, "He said you're not really in charge." I held her and said nothing, because what comfort can you offer when a child has just described your truth? That night, I confronted Laura. "I can't keep pretending this is working," I said. She rubbed her temples. "They're just kids, Ryan. Teenagers are cruel sometimes. They're cruel because you let them be." Her eyes flashed, but not with guilt, with fatigue. "You're overreacting." I wasn't. I was finally reacting at all. The next morning, I found the car keys missing. Cole had taken them to drive to practice without asking. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Mom said it's fine." I turned to Laura, who stood by the doorway, silent. The way silence can sound like permission. That was the day I realized I wasn't a stepfather anymore. I was a bystander with bills. I started counting things without meaning to. How many times I spoke before someone answered. How many dinners ended in silence. How many times Laura defended them instead of me. Numbers became proof that love had a limit, and I'd reached it. Even my own children began to change. Liam watched, confused, trying to understand why his step-siblings could ignore me without consequence. He started asking permission less often, testing boundaries in small ways. Hannah grew quiet, too quiet. She stopped leaving drawings on the fridge, stopped laughing at my jokes. That's when I knew the poison had spread. Disrespect doesn't stay contained. It seeps through walls, contaminating everything it touches. I tried to correct it gently. Family meetings, calm talks, compromises. I said the word respect so many times it lost its shape. Cole smirked through every conversation. Ava rolled her eyes. Laura rubbed her temples and said, "Can we not do this right now?" We always did it later, which meant never. The turning point came one Saturday morning. I'd spent hours mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, fixing the leak under the sink. The kind of invisible work that keeps a house alive. Cole walked in, grabbed a soda, and tossed the empty can onto the counter I just wiped clean. "Pick that up," I said. He didn't even look at me. "Mom'll do it." "Cole." He turned, eyes flat. "You're not my dad." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They carried the calm precision of something practiced. I froze. Liam was in the doorway, watching. Ava smirked. Laura came in from the hallway, eyes wide but silent. Always silent. I waited for her to say something, to defend me, to remind them that I was her husband, that this house ran on my effort. But she just looked away. That silence was louder than any insult. I picked up the can myself, threw it away, said nothing, because in that moment, I understood something every stepfather eventually learns. You can't demand respect in a house that was never built to give it. After that, something in me began to close. Not with anger, but with clarity. I stopped trying to be liked. I started watching instead, studying the small rituals of disregard. The way Cole laughed when Steve's name came up. The way Laura smiled at her phone when messages arrived from numbers she didn't explain. The way Ava used my money without ever using my name. One night, while clearing the table, I overheard Ava telling a friend on the phone, "We only live here because Mom married him. It's not even really his house. Not even really his house." I stood there in the dark kitchen, her words echoing against the tile, realizing she was right in every way that mattered. The deed might bear my name, but the soul of the house belonged to someone else. When you're a stepfather, you learn that love isn't symmetrical. You can pour it in, but it doesn't always pour back. You can build a home with both hands, only to find your fingerprints wiped clean. Still, I kept the peace. Because peace, even fake peace, feels better than the chaos that follows truth. But the more I gave, the more they took. The more they took, the less I existed. There's a point where patience becomes self-erasure. I crossed it quietly, without ceremony. By the time Cole turned 16, he barely spoke to me. Ava treated me like a ghost who paid for Wi-Fi. Laura and I stopped touching. My children stopped smiling. The cracks had stopped forming. They were now canyons. Every night, I'd walk through the house after everyone was asleep. The quiet halls, the flicker of forgotten lights, the echo of laughter that never included me, felt like walking through a museum of my own failure. I kept telling myself that good men stay, that leaving would make me like the father who'd abandoned them before, that endurance was its own kind of virtue, but endurance without respect becomes slow suicide. The night I realized that, I sat in the dark living room with a glass of water, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant laughter from upstairs. Cole and Ava were watching something funny, their voices rising, carefree. My own children slept quietly down the hall. Laura was in bed, pretending to dream through the noise. That sound, the laughter of people who don't need you, was the loneliest music I'd ever heard. I sat there until it faded, until the silence pressed down like a closing door. And in that silence, I finally understood. This wasn't a family. It was a collection of debts waiting to be called due. The respect I'd spent years trying to buy had never been for sale. It didn't happen suddenly. Breaking points never do. They collect quietly in corners. The late-night insults, the silences that sting more than words, the small humiliations swallowed so the house can keep breathing. For me, the last straw arrived wearing the face of a 15-year-old boy. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of Phoenix heat that melts thought into anger. Liam and I were in the garage building a remote-controlled car. A father and son project that had taken weeks of sanding, wiring, testing. The kind of thing that teaches patience, the kind of thing that feels like redemption. When we finished, Liam's hands were greasy, his smile wide. "It's perfect," he said. I told him to test it on the driveway. Cole was standing there when we came out. Arms crossed, phone in hand, that smirk that always made me feel like a trespasser in my own yard. Liam set the car down and sent it gliding forward. It ran smooth and fast, a streak of red and silver. Cole watched, unimpressed. Then, without a word, he lifted his foot and crushed it. Not a stumble, not an accident. A deliberate, slow grind of heel on plastic until the gears cracked and the engine hissed its last breath. Liam froze. I did too. The air went hollow. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low. Cole shrugged. "It's just a toy." Liam's eyes filled with tears. I could see his lip trembling, that small betrayal of a child's effort destroyed. "It's not just a toy," I said. "Apologize." Cole looked me dead in the eyes. "For what? It's not like I broke anything important." That sentence carried years inside it. Years of disrespect, of dismissal of Laura's silence. It was all there, sharpened into a single act of cruelty. I sent Liam inside before I did something I'd regret. He went quietly, clutching the broken pieces in his hands. When the door closed, Cole laughed, soft, almost bored. "You should chill. You get worked up over everything." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. Really looked. The boy wasn't even angry, just entitled. He knew nothing would happen. His mother would defend him, his father would be unreachable, and I would eventually let it go. But this time I didn't. That night, I sat alone in the darkened living room. Laura was asleep. The house was quiet except for the ceiling fan creaking above me. I opened my laptop, the blue glow cutting across the room, and started a different kind of project. I made a list, everything that tied them to me. The mortgage, the car insurance, the internet bill, the streaming accounts, the phones, the health insurance, the school supplies, the credit cards, The small comforts that made their lives seamless. Invisible luxuries they thought came from nowhere. All under my name. I stared at the numbers for hours. It was staggering, the cost of my own invisibility. Then, without hesitation, I started dismantling it. Click. The phone plans gone. Click. The streaming accounts canceled. Click. The car insurance adjusted to exclude anyone who mocked me. Click. The joint account frozen. Each confirmation email felt like a breath released after years of holding it in. I wasn't angry. Anger burns too hot. This was colder, cleaner. The kind of clarity that arrives when you finally stop lying to yourself. By midnight, the house was silent, and I was free. I packed Cole and Ava's belongings into boxes. Their hoodies, shoes, phones, chargers, all the clutter they'd left scattered like confetti after a parade they didn't earn. I stacked the boxes in the garage, labeled neatly. When I was done, I changed the locks. It was all business now. At dawn, I sent a short message to Steve. Come pick up the kids. They'll be staying with you for a while. No explanation. No argument. Just boundaries. Laura woke an hour later, bleary-eyed. She found me in the kitchen, calm, coffee in hand. What's going on? She asked, sensing the quiet wrongness of the house. I made a decision, I said. Her brow furrowed. What decision? I shut everything down. The accounts, the phones, the extras. Cole and Ava are going to stay with their father. Her voice cracked. What? You can't just, Ryan, you can't do that. I can, I said softly. And I did. She stared at me, disbelief twisting into anger. They're children. No, I said. They're old enough to destroy things on purpose. Old enough to call me nothing. Old enough to live by the truth they keep repeating. That I'm not their father. So I'm giving them what they want. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. You're overreacting. Maybe. But for the first time, I'm reacting at all. Her voice rose. What about their school? Their friends? Their lives? What about my son's face when Cole crushed his? That silenced her. For a long moment we just stood there, the air between us thick with years of unspoken exhaustion. Finally, she whispered, Steve can't handle them. You know that. Then they'll learn what it means to depend on the man they call real. She turned away, muttering something I didn't catch. By the time she found her phone, it was already disconnected. The look in her eyes when the call failed, that was when the reality of my decision reached her. When Steve arrived, the sun was already high. He stepped out of his truck wearing sunglasses and guilt disguised as confidence. What's this about? He asked. Your kids, I said. They're ready to go. He looked past me toward the garage, saw the boxes and hesitated. Laura didn't say. She didn't know until this morning. He frowned. You're serious? I nodded. More than I've ever been. Laura appeared behind me, pale, trembling. Ryan, please. But I'd spent years listening to pleas that came after the damage. Steve muttered something about how unfair this was, but he loaded the boxes anyway. Cole and Ava came downstairs, confused at first, then furious. Ava asked, What's happening? You're going to stay with your dad for a while, I said. Cole scoffed. You can't kick us out. I'm not kicking you out, I said quietly. I'm giving you back. Laura started crying then, a low, tired sound that filled the hall like smoke. When the truck pulled away, the silence that followed was unlike anything I'd known. Not peaceful, not sad, just balanced. For years, I'd been the scaffolding holding up a house that pretended it didn't need me. Now, stripped bare, it finally stood or fell on its own. That evening, Liam and Hannah sat at the table doing homework. No tension, no noise, just the sound of pencils and breathing. Laura moved through the house like a ghost. She didn't speak to me, didn't need to. Everything worth saying had already been said in silence. I poured a glass of water and watched my children laugh quietly over something simple, something small. Felt foreign, that kind of calm. Later that night, when Laura finally looked at me, her voice was barely above a whisper. They'll hate you for this. I nodded. Maybe, but they'll remember it. She stared at me for a long time, then asked, "Do you even feel bad?" I thought about that, about the years of effort, the sacrifices that became invisible the moment Steve's name was mentioned, the nights spent proving my worth to people who decided it didn't exist. "No," I said finally. "I feel awake." When she went upstairs, I stayed where I was. The house around me was half empty, but for the first time it didn't feel hostile, just honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, is cleaner than love built on disrespect. I sat there until the clock hit midnight, the desert wind humming against the windows. Then I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, "Kindness without limits becomes weakness." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was equilibrium. The next morning, the air felt lighter, the house smaller but real. Liam and Hannah came down for breakfast, their voices soft, unburdened. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an intruder. I felt like a father again. And that was enough. Peace didn't arrive with music. It arrived with absence. No slammed doors. No whispered conspiracies in the hallway. Just quiet. Liam and Hannah spread their homework across the kitchen table like a small ceremony. They argued about pencils and fractions, then laughed. Laughter, the clean kind, flowed through rooms that had been haunted. I moved more slowly, as if sound itself might shatter. The house felt smaller, truer. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I could hear my own breath. On the second morning, I found Hannah drawing again. She had stopped for months, as if paper itself had become dangerous. Now she shaded a canyon rim with the soft patience of someone returning to a language. When she caught me watching, she smiled without flinching. That was the first mercy. Laura moved like a woman walking through smoke. She set mugs down gently, as if noise might confess her. We brushed past each other in the kitchen, careful, polite. Her silence was no longer a we *p*n. It was a mirror. I could finally see what it had cost us. By Thursday, the phone rang. "Steve." His voice tried for casual and landed on pleading. "They want to come back," he said. "Cole and Ava. They get it now." I let the words hang. He filled the quiet like a man throwing sand on a spill. "They say they're sorry. They're different. They'll follow the rules. I can bring them by Friday." Rules. That word had been laughed at in this house. I said yes. Then I wrote them down. I made a list before they returned, simple, brutal, clear. Not because I believed paper could make a family, but because it could at least make a boundary. Chores divided. Curfews stated. Consequences measured. A clause about restitution. Anything broken would be replaced by the hands that broke it. And the first rule, the one that mattered more than doors or dishes: respect is the price of admission. When Steve's truck crawled up the curb, the sun was low and the heat mean. Cole stepped out first, older by a week, that had taught him arithmetic. Cost versus comfort. Ava followed, smaller than I remembered. They didn't rush me. They didn't look away either. Laura stood behind me, hands folded like she was holding something that might fly. We didn't hug. We sat. I laid the paper on the table. Read each line. No speeches. No smoke. Ava nodded fast, eyes shining. Cole kept his gaze on the words, as if reading could save him from the man who wrote them. When I finished, I slid over a pen. Cole looked up. "I'm sorry," he said. Not big, not grand. A small thing that didn't wobble. For Liam's car. For all of it. Ava spoke to Hannah, not to me. "I'm sorry I made you feel small." That was the right audience. Hannah's chin lifted. She accepted. It mattered more than my forgiveness. We signed them first, then me, then Laura. Felt like a closing and then like a beginning. The first week back was skeletal. No extra screens. No rides on demand. They were citizens now, not tourists. Cole mowed the yard without being asked. Ava cleaned the bathroom grout with the quiet rage of someone paying a bill. They cooked twice, oversalted the pasta, burned the toast, and served it anyway. We ate it. That's how you rebuild, one imperfect plate at a time. Restitution began where it should. The broken car. Liam and I laid the ruined pieces on the garage table. Cole stood there, hands empty. He didn't apologize again. He asked for instructions. That was enough. We stripped the cracked shell, measured new axles, soldered the motor. He burned his thumb and didn't complain. Liam handed him the tiny screws with the careful grace of a boy learning to be believed again. 3 evenings later, the car ran. Not as fast, not as clean, but honest. Cole didn't drive it. He watched his little brother take the first lap and clapped once. Quiet. That was the second mercy. Ava's restitution took a different shape. She started packing Hannah's lunch at night. Little things, cut fruit, a note folded small as a secret. Said simple words, "You're good. You're seen." She didn't sign her name. Hannah recognized the handwriting anyway. I did too. Laura hovered in the doorways of these moments like a witness who wants to testify but fears perjury. 3 nights in, she spoke. "I should have defended you," she said. "I didn't. I won't make that mistake again." I didn't answer with comfort. I answered with the list. "Then enforce it," I said. "Every time. When I'm not here, especially then." She nodded. It was not romance. It was a repair. Steve called twice more, once to ask if things were stable, once to offer tickets to a game. He spoke like a man trying to rewrite his job description. I told him yes on stability, no on tickets. "Gifts don't fix structure," I said. He was quiet. Maybe he heard it. Maybe he didn't. At school, the past tried to collect. A boy shoved Hannah in the lunch line and called her soft. Cole saw it. I wasn't there, thank God. He stepped between them, calm and steady. "Don't touch my sister," he said. "Your sister." The cafeteria swallowed the words and learned a new rule. That evening he told me what happened with the spare language of a penitent. "Handled," he said. "No detention." He didn't wait for praise. He went to take out the trash. Some sentences carry their own reward. The house changed temperature by degrees. Doors closed more gently. Lights were switched off without being told. The TV volume fell below the level that starts wars. I began to hear "Please" and "After you" and "I've got it." Not always. Often enough. One night, Cole stood at the threshold of my office like a boy waiting to be paroled. "I told a guy at school you were my father," he said. No ceremony. He was running his mouth about the car I drive. He swallowed. "I said it came from my dad. I meant you." I didn't rush the moment. I let it breathe until it found its own size. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once. Left. That was the third mercy, and the first one that stung. Because here is the truth you don't hear in tidy endings. Forgiveness has interest. Collects on what was wasted. You can rebuild, but you can't unspend the years. We kept the list visible. Taped to the fridge, the paper curled at the corners from the heat of this desert and our days. When someone slipped, and they did, we didn't sermonize. We pointed at Rule 3 or 5 or 8. People like to pretend love is a feeling. In this house, love learned to read. There were setbacks. Ava slammed a door once, hard enough to rattle the frame. She apologized through it. We waited. She opened it. She cleaned the hinge she'd loosened. Cole forgot curfew on a Friday. He lost the car for a week. He didn't argue. He mowed the yard twice. Laura and I learned a new choreography that didn't ask me to be saint or ghost. She corrected without looking to me for courage. I enforced without asking her permission. We met at the table, not in whispers behind closed doors. Marriage, it turned out, is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of the same rulebook. On the first cool night after summer broke, we ate on the patio. The sky went lavender. Planes muttered their slow approach to Sky Harbor. Hannah showed us a drawing, our 4 shadows on the driveway elongated, connected. She had written one word beneath it. Home. We were quiet a long time. That's how you honor fragile things. Later, when the dishes were done and the air went thin, Laura touched my arm. "You were right," she said, "about kindness and limits." "I was late," I said, "but I got there." I walked the hall before bed the way I used to, touching door frames, listening for the small sounds that prove a house is alive. 2 steady breaths. 1 restless turn. A soft cough. The old ritual returned with a different prayer. Let tomorrow be earned the same way. Sometimes I remember the day of the boxes, the way the street swallowed their anger and spat back quiet. I don't regret it. Not because it hurt them into obedience, but because it taught all of us the map. Consequence, then change, then care. In that order. Always. People ask what made the difference. It wasn't speeches. It wasn't grace. It was the bill. They learned the cost of contempt. I learned the cost of enabling it. We paid in cash and days and pride until the math made sense. Now when the phone buzzes with Steve's name, no one flinches. The desert teaches you about mirages. You can love water and still refuse to chase heat shimmer. Tonight, the house settles. Liam snores once, denies it in his sleep. Hannah's sketchbook is open on her dresser. Charcoal smudges like small storms on her fingers. Ava's alarm is set early for cleanup duty. Cole's boots wait by the back door, dusted in grass and apology. Laura breathes beside me without guilt. I stand in the doorway of the dark kitchen, the list white against the stainless steel. My reflection is faint in the glass. I don't look like a hero. I look like a man who finally priced his soul at retail. Family is not blood. Family is contract. Family is work enforced. I think of the night I changed the locks. Of the morning I opened the door again. I think of the 3 mercies that followed, paid for in full. Was I wrong?